Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much, Tim, for that nice introduction. Maybe a little exaggerated on the number of years. I think that might have been from the beginning of residency or medical school, probably. I haven't been practicing for that long. But as far as endocrinology, I have been practicing for about 10 years or so. And so thank you so much for coming and spending your morning with us. And I'll begin. The topic, of course, is going to be technology and managing your diabetes today. And I broke it down into 3 different sections. Conflict of interest disclosure. I may be speaking for Dexcom in the near future, just to kind of give that piece of information out. Technology, yeah. So again, the 3 different topics that I wanted to break down the presentation today morning include continuous glucose monitoring systems. Those systems include Dexcom and Libre. I do believe this is going to be the biggest portion of conversation and interest, simply because it's really in the forefront of everyone's opportunity to have, utilize, and benefit from. And then we have insulin pens. They are smart pens is another terminology that we use. They come in the form of the Medtronic InPen, which I have in my pocket right now, and I've got that Tempo pen as well. And of course, we have insulin pumps, which is another third topic of technology. They've been around for a number of years, and the 3 main players in this group or this class includes the t:slim tandem insulin pump. There's the Omnipod 5 insulin pump, and you have the Medtronic 770G as well. So that's the way I kind of want to break down the presentation. And so the first and foremost, these are the 3 continuous glucose monitoring systems that are currently available. You have Libre. There's a Libre 2 and there's a Libre 3. It varies on who may get what based on insurance to some degree, but it's a nice little cute small patch. I have the Libre 3 on me right now. We'll go through some of the readings later in the presentation. There's the Medtronic Guardian, about the same size as well, and it will have user interface with a software on your phone. And then, of course, you have the Dexcom. There's a G6 available, and there's a G7 available. And again, there's reasons why you may want a G6 versus a G7 sensor, and they also operate with software on your smartphone. There's also a reader, and then there's also, well, the watch is sort of an add-on as well. So some people come into my office and they ask, I heard about the Libre sensor. What is it? How does it operate? Is it a surgical implantation? What are the costs? And can I get it? So there's a lot of information baked into those questions, but they come very quickly and very curiously. And so I hope you have those questions, and those questions can be answered for you either right now through my presentation or during the Q&A session. We can kind of get some of that clarified. So it's a nice opportunity to be able to speak with everyone that's interested today, as opposed to one-on-one in the office space. So once again, thank you for coming. As far as the continuous glucose monitoring systems, you can see the sensor, it sits on the skin. There's an adhesive that is on the dermal layer, and then there's a filament that is applied into the skin, in the interstitial layer of your body, not quite into the bloodstream or a vein, and nothing large like that, but it's just like in this like liquidy layer between the skin and blood vessels. And so realize that that kind of technology is a little different than a glucose meter that we are used to checking with a finger stick. If anyone checks their blood sugar in such a way, they're getting that from capillary blood. So it's worth mentioning that the glucose values will may differ. There's a little bit of variability baked into all current technologies and even previous technologies, but we always continue to improve as time goes on. So some basics about the sensors. They last on your skin or in your subdermal layer for about 7 to 14 days, depending on which sensor you are using. They check your blood sugars every 1 to 5 minutes, as opposed to the glucose meter where you check your blood sugar once a day or sometimes 3 or 4 times a day, depending on your needs. So there's a lot more information that you can see and to some degree can benefit from. When you have this on I say on board, but when it's on your skin, the question is, well, can I go to sleep with it? How do I sleep with it? Can I take a shower? So it really is painless. I've forgotten that this is on me right now. It's very comfortable. And even applying it is very comfortable. It just kind of feels like a puff of air. I'm sure there's maybe some pain involved, but I actually am shocked and surprised. There's a little bit of anxiety when I press the button to put it on me, but there's just no painful sensation. It's quite impressive with the most latest versions of their versions. The previous ones, maybe a decade ago, they were very uncomfortable and you kind of feel it, but nowadays they're pretty comfortable. With that being said, you can shower with them, you can go swimming with them, you can run a marathon with them. Many people do. It's quite insightful in terms of what happens to your body when you are accomplishing your lifestyle goals. So we talked a little bit about the application process, but just formally, how do we get this thing on? First and foremost, you have to download the app. So we actually do this in the office. People come in, and once in a while, certainly if they meet criteria, indication, we think it's necessary, or even just find value in the insight, we'll ask them to download the app if their smartphone allows to. So that's the first step. Then the app will give a series of things and instructions to finally say, hey, go ahead and apply. And that's the next picture over. I know there's a laser on here. Laser. Can you guys see the lasers? I was told. Okay, well, applying the sensor is this individual here on the right top corner. There's a little cup for those that are watching on video, and he's just pressing the cup into his skin. And I did this 3 days ago, and it's actually surprisingly comfortable. And then there is a little bit of a lag, about 30-minute warm-up, 1-hour warm-up, depending on which product you're using. So if you want to wait for that 30 minutes to an hour, you play with your dog, you eat a cake like I did in the morning today, and then see what happens, basically. The cake is by design. I don't usually eat this way, but I just wanted to see what would happen in the morning so that we have something to look at later in the slides. I'm going to try to keep up with our schedule. I think we're doing good. I tend to ramble, so I'll be faster. Advantages. So what are the advantages of a glucose monitoring system? So it checks blood sugars 24 hours a day. I think we already went over that. I hope I made that clear. Some important features that we don't have in front of us when we check blood sugars intermittently throughout the day is, am I having a low blood sugar? Am I having a high blood sugar? These are very concerning things, and there's definitely research out there that shows reduction of concern when you have products like this, because there are alarms. The alarms will tell you, I have a blood sugar of 70, I need to do something about it. Or I have a blood sugar of 250, and I need to do something about it. When you're checking your blood sugar, it can be hours until you find out that information. Another big important piece is if you are to have a low blood sugar, you're kind of siloed into this information to me, myself, and I. Where with these products, they can actually be shared to other family members. So if you are in the middle of driving and you're concentrating on driving, but then all of a sudden you can't concentrate on driving because you're having a low blood sugar, it's entirely possible that in the new world, your family member can be alerted to the low blood sugar, call you up on the phone. Hopefully you're not picking up the phone while driving, but you can pick up the phone while driving through Bluetooth or something, and then ultimately be notified, hey, can you pull over to the side before you, and then have a little bit of juice or some glucose, whatever you can, like, use case can be made for this, but your family and friends and even providers can be given this information live. Providers, not so much. I don't know that we want it live. I mean, that's not true. We want it live, but the resources don't allow us to witness it live yet. That'd be great if we did at some point, though. Provides prediction of future blood sugar. Yeah, some of the cool ones, the new ones, they can actually predict where your sugars are going to go in the next 5 to 10 minutes as well. More to come on that. Helps lower HbA1c through the power of knowing. I think we mentioned this. Too low, too high. We can do something about it early rather than later, hours later. Why are CGMs important? I do want to kind of, I don't want to, again, ramble, say things over and over. We talked about this. Individual time points on blood sugar. Early notifications of out of range, yes, and then medical management, of course, low blood sugars, 15 grams of carbohydrates, high blood sugars, give yourself your medications that you might need, insulin, for example, or what have you, or water even, can help lower blood sugars in an urgent manner. Why are CGMS important? For all the things that we mentioned, there's definitely research out there showing A1C reduction, increased time in range, which is now what we look at more recently. So it's not just about HbA1c anymore. So if we actually look back at the last slide, it's important to kind of outline. If you can see this, it's maybe a little difficult. Maybe I'm going to use my hands here a little bit. But the glucose management indicator there says 7.1. That suggests an average blood sugar of about 140 or so. That would be very exciting and would be a goal for most people coming into my office, 7.0. But if we look carefully, the time that is spent in range is 54%. We certainly can get a 7.0 or 7.1, but have time in range at 70%. And we know that doing so will reduce your cardiovascular risk event, meaning we're going to improve your overall length of life by having more time spent in range. So a 7.0 HbA1c is great and dandy. It's certainly better than a 10.0, but there's a better version of a 7.0, one that doesn't exist with lows and highs or less lows and highs. Oh, so this is mine from earlier last week. There's a lot to be said about this. Hopefully people have Q&A from this. I think I'm just going to go to the live demo to have that conversation. But basically, I saw that my sugar wiggles all throughout the day. I do have prediabetes, full disclosure, and therefore it's not flat. I wish it was. Apps integrated with Dexcom. So some sensors can actually integrate with other apps. So interestingly and uniquely, I did use some of these in the last month, and I was actually very encouraged because this presentation forced me to do it. I wouldn't have otherwise, I'll be honest. But the one on the left is something called Under My Fork, and what's happening is there's a sensor on the very top of that app. That Dexcom sensor is bringing that track record through their app, which is also on your phone, but it's bringing it into this app. And then at the same time, if you're eating food and you don't have time to necessarily log a bunch of stuff in, realistically, you can open up this app, take a picture, and it'll just log it in right there. And it actually gives you a little bit of information about what the grams of carbs may be, an approximation, and it'll kind of put it on that timeline that, hey, this is when you ate this food. Because 7 days from now, when you want to look back, you're like, oh man, what was that spike? I don't know what I ate. It must have been something, but I don't remember what. But this is an actual picture log. You didn't really have to invest a whole lot of time in, except for get the picture down and then move on when you're having conversation with your friends or eating with your friends. So neat little tool. Happy Bob. Barbara's going to talk a little bit more about this as she comes on. It's just a nice way of getting engaged, some positive feedback, positive comments made by the app as you're doing good. And of course, there might be some snarky comments too if you're not doing great. So it keeps you engaged in an overall positive light, quality of life benefits. And even just being engaged with your health helps improve your health in some format. So it's a nice little tool. SugarMate's there too, and we're going to talk about that later on in the presentations. Ooh, someone made that for me. So anyway, I was supposed to do this along during the conversation. Best laid plans, right? Oh, this is the live demo. Okay, so let's do the live demo really quick. All right. Thank you, guys. So what should I do? I guess since I have a brief moment, if I have a brief moment, yeah, I got time. So this is a Dexcom G7, and then it's pretty small. I have a Libre on me. It's about the same size. I apologize to the reps back there in case they're like, no, it's not. It's smaller. But I've got one here, and it looks about like this. This is the one that I used about last 10 days, short of 3 days ago. So since I'm using the Libre 3, and I had my chocolate cake from last night, today morning, to prove a point, let's talk about this. So, oh my God, what's that? Okay, so this is what happens when you are a grazer. In the morning, I had breakfast, and that included 2 eggs. I'm not sure exactly where those eggs are because mostly that's protein, but that first spike, that spike right there, That is the chocolate cake. And even though I can't show you the number, that number was, I told someone earlier today, I don't know if they can remember, but it was like 161. It was very alarming for me. That was one of my top 3 in the last month that I've been looking at all this stuff. That was a lot of chocolate cake. But I wanted you to see that. And so what ended up happening was, of course, I ate the 2 eggs as quick as possible to maybe help, not lower per se, but drag that sugar along. Maybe prevent the spike from moving upwards. I drank about a half a liter of water as well. And so now all of a sudden, plus my health in general, it is pre-diabetes, so I do have enough to bring it back down. And it went back down pretty quickly. But then I came here. I'd love to say this was being nervous, but it wasn't. I had a coffee. And it was with Splenda. I had 4 Splenda. So that's not what caused the sugars to spike. But what did cause that sugar to spike to 140 right now are the 2 creamers that I had. I don't want to throw the company under the bus that I had it from, so I'm just going to. Got to be careful. I didn't think it was going to do that, 140 guys. But I'm glad I do this, right? So all of us can benefit from this. It's insightful. It's very, very insightful. And actually, in case I forget, it also keeps you to some level accountable. We have research that shows just by having it on, I'm sure it's in the presentation, but just by having it on, you behave differently. And that behavior improves your sugar values, your glucose values. Your A1C will reduce by about half of an A1C point. I'd like to even say it's around 1.1 to 1.4% A1C drop in about 12 weeks of usage. It starts to dwindle down after longer periods of time. For example, 6 months, 3 to 6 months, it comes down to about 0.6. But that initial 12 weeks, you see a pretty dramatic change. And on a personal note, I can speak on behalf of that. I did not eat any donuts for the 10 days that I was on the Dexcom, none. And that's my favorite food. Pizza is another one. And I have yet to have pizza because of the original Dexcom and the current Libre. So it does help watch what you eat, even in proportion. Even if you might want that donut, you might have a sliver of the donut as opposed to the half or the whole. It's insightful. So that should hopefully kind of summarize or sum up the whole sensor. We'll have questions and answers. Again, that is probably the most upcoming thing in a diabetes person's life. It is becoming more and more readily available. The costs are coming down for this product. People are understanding the value of it. And think of it from this perspective. Decades ago, we were diagnosing diabetes by a doctor tasting someone's urine. That was the best case scenario of checking someone's blood sugar. Sorry if I made people squeamy. Sorry, this is on record forever. But then we moved forward a little bit, and then we had a urine dipstick. We would be able to see certain variations. Then we have finger sticks, and now we have this. So just consider this the future, near future. Now, let's talk about smart pens. Smart pens are another way of engaging in your care and in your health and seeing all these products and how they operate together. This is the Medtronic InPen. And what it is, I have one of these as well. I'm just going to pass it around because it's not going to have a lot of value in my pocket. And actually, before I hand it to you, I'm going to take it back. Thank you. Sorry. So it's an InPen, meaning your doctor, if you are prescribed insulin, can prescribe the cartridge as opposed to the pen altogether. They can prescribe the cartridge. You would then put it into this product called an InPen. By doing so, there's a Bluetooth connectivity with the pen that connects to the software. And so then that software will be able to interpret and understand every time you click 5 units, you administer 5 units, it will log that into the software on the app. And you'll see all those places. So this is that. Another nice benefit of the InPen is that you can use it for half unit increments for those that only use 5 units of insulin, 2 units of insulin. They might benefit from a 2.5 units of insulin. So children can benefit from something like this quite a lot. So that's the InPen. A little bit more robust information about the InPen and what it brings to the table. So Medtronic InPen, along with the Medtronic sensor, you can see the graph in there. That's the sensor that's showing the sugar. Down underneath in that same, that is the amount of insulin that you administered. It just logs it in automatically when you press the insulin pen. And on the top, the green area is where the grams of carbohydrates are going to be represented. So when you look carefully, you can see, this middle insulin administration wasn't enough for the meal and my sugar still went up. So when a doctor has all of those three pieces of information, or a nurse practitioner or a dietitian, they can interpret this and can make another judgment. Excuse me. For example, you may need proportionally more insulin for that particular meal. And those settings can be placed into the software by a provider so that you can be given a new set of instructions if you use the insulin calculator that is built into this software. So this software then will give you instructions to say, I'm going to have 60 grams of carbohydrates. Because the provider gave some amount of instruction, it will then spit out a certain amount of insulin to be taken. You then administer that. So it takes away some of the burden of thought as you are working through your life. At Tempo, something very, very similar, where their focus is, they don't do the calculator, I don't believe yet. I think they may do it in the future, but they're really focused on providing you kind of what we're doing today. Give you information about dietary things, recipes. If you look carefully, the very top is the blood sugar. Dexcom actually incorporates into this app, so mine had a lot of log readings, because every 5 minutes there was a new reading in there. But anyway, there's glucose values, there's recipes here, so a lot of educational tools in the software, but it does record the amount of insulin that you're taking through that same Bluetooth. There's a Bluetooth knob on that particular pen. So all the things that Tempo has to offer are, again, more engagement, educational tools like the diabetes, what is diabetes, and things of that nature. For someone who's motivated, wants to read more about it, they can get some basic question and answers, kind of like I said, what we're doing today. Recipes are that I actually found the recipes kind of cool because you want really good food for low carbohydrates, and I get sick of eating eggs all the time. So this is really neat. Insulin pump. So I'm glad that we don't have a lot of time, and there's conversations about insulin pumps and what they are and what they're not. And so what insulin pumps are, just like a sensor checks your blood sugar and gives you that information continuously. An insulin pump administers insulin continuously. So I think the big takeaway here, in case I run out of time or if I want to just run away, is that they can work together. And when they work together, they can potentially, and research has shown that they can improve your sugar control as well. These are some things that have been occurring in the last 5 years. A lot of technological escalation, progress has occurred to have these components talk to each other. The sensors from the beginning of the presentation with the pumps at the end of our presentation, they can now talk to each other with a little bit of input and some complex ways of putting it all together. Once it's on us, they control our sugars at all times. If you are an individual with insulin, there's definitely a potential benefit here. The cannula, there's a tubing that goes in depending on which pump, and then it stays in for every 3 days. The reason for that is to prevent or reduce infection, but more importantly, there's actually a skin fold that will occur over the cannula, preventing insulin from going through. So you want to change it every 3 days. And again, can you shower with it? Can you exercise with it? Absolutely. In some cases with aggressive exercise, you can disconnect. They can also work independently of a sensor in case you don't want a sensor, but usually it's the other way around. Either way, you've got these products. So very briefly, you have the Omnipod Dash, you have the Omnipod 5, you have the Medtronic 770G, you have the Tandem T Slim. So you have these three major products that are readily available, and they operate with sensors. In fact, they all operate with sensors. I think that's the main takeaway here. They can also work independently, but it's important to remember that all these three products are incredibly great because of their incorporation with sensors. Again, they can work independently. They have in the past, up until probably 5 years ago, they were working only independently. And this is a look at the products. So you've got the Omnipod over here on the left, and it's just a pod, a little device. You stick it on you go through the software, press the button, and then it puts the cannula in your body. The other two, they have an applicator, just like that, very similar to the other one, meaning the other sensors, and you apply it. That's the cannula, and then there's an infusion set, so a tubing that you can disconnect when you are going for a shower or a swim, and then you can put it right back on again. So it's not like you have to take everything out and put it all back in and out and all that. Advantages of an insulin pump, I think, again, very briefly, keeping everyone on time. With long-acting insulin, for anyone that is, you can take, let's say, 25 units last night. When you take 25 units of long-acting insulin last night, and you decide you want to run for an hour today morning, now you're going to be concerned, well, shoot, is that 25 units going to cause me to have a low blood sugar? In the case of an insulin pump, you can actually pause the insulin pump or reduce the basal insulin right at that moment at the time that you decide to have a run. So if you decide you want to have a run at 8 o'clock, you can pause or reduce your basal at that time. Or if you decide to have it at 10 o'clock, you could do it at that time. So it works a little bit more with your lifestyle, depending on what you want to do and how you do it. Another big benefit of a pump, if you are thinking, I'm really interested in a pump, there is a lot of work. It is complicated to initially start up. I think from one benefit, though, is I have this second pen, the insulin pen that I take, and I use it for each meal, and I have 7 meals. And we saw that coffee didn't exactly work with me. Well, in the case of a pump, I can have that second, I can press a couple buttons, I can give myself a baby amount of insulin as opposed to taking out a pen 7 times a day. So there's that little tiny added benefit of, again, matching your physiological needs. Especially if you are with someone that forgets your insulin pen at home, then you have the insulin pump on you at all times. And so the questions I think we're going to leave for the end. I'm on schedule. And I think, is it going to, Tim, you're going to introduce the next person? Yeah. Thank you so much, everyone. Thanks for your time.